The National Shooting Sports Foundation, Mark Oliva, joins us. Mark, this is just like the same record going over and over again, isn't it?
It really is, Tom. It's just a matter of, let's rehash the old talking points, no matter how much they've been debunked and just straight out lie to the American public, which if you endure the hour plus of Andrew Cuomo droning on is exactly what he did, starting with the lie of the firearms industry cannot be sued. And that's an absolute false statement to make. The firearm industry manufacturers can be sued. They have been sued in the past for defective products.
Sure.
Still can be, but the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act does exactly what you said. It just says you can't drag the gun manufacturers, distributors, or retailers into the courtroom for the crimes committed by somebody else. That's just basic tort law.
Well, when Joe Biden said from the Rose Garden that the firearms industry is the only industry that can't be sued, even the Washington Post fact checker said that is not true. They gave it a big old false when he said it, and it's just as false when Andrew Cuomo says it. But where's the media on this?
Yeah, they've been suspiciously silent, haven't they? And you're right. They did say it was false when President Biden made the claim, and they made the same distinction back in 2015-16 when Hillary Clinton tried to pass on the same lie. They called her out on it, said it was false. So it's a tired talking point. It's been proven false time and again, but he continues to stick to it, thinking that maybe if he just says it enough, it'll become true. And it doesn't work that way.
Well, of course, the whole idea is he doesn't have to convince people, or doesn't have to make people understand that it's true. He just has to convince enough people so that he can get laws like this passed. And what they did is they went in New York and kind of altered their law. They amended New York's public nuisance statute to specifically include marketing and sales practices that contribute to gun crimes, basically saying if you sell guns as a gun maker in such a way that we think that's going to contribute to crime, not only can the government sue you, but individuals can bring suit against gun makers, opening the doors to thousands, literally thousands of lawsuits against gun makers.
Yeah, it's exactly right. They're trying to punch a hole right through the middle of the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act, and that's exactly why the National Shooting Sports Foundation is taking the lead to challenge this law. Mm-hmm. But the bottom line is that courts, time and again, since the law was passed in 2005, have upheld the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act as a constitutional law. They said that it absolutely, goes in line with everything that we understand to be law, any understanding of the Constitution. It goes along with any understanding of tort law, and that is, when you're going to hold somebody responsible for their misdeeds or negligence or their criminal actions. Again, this is basically saying that you could take the firearm manufacturer to court for the criminal actions of a third party. It's just like saying you could take someone to court, or you could take Budweiser and Ford to court for the criminal negligence of a drunk driver that causes harm in criminal action as well. So it just doesn't make sense.
Mark, I think sometimes those of us involved with this, we get really caught up in the minutia of things, and we're trying to explain things away, and we're trying to make sense of it all. And we know what's really going on. And sometimes I think we forget to back up and tell people, look, here's what's actually happening. Forget the wording, forget what they're saying, forget the stuff in courts. What's actually happening is Andrew Cuomo and the gun ban lobby sees this as their silver bullet. This is the way that they could destroy, literally shut down gun making in America, because if they can get the courts to support this, and if they're allowed to sue gun makers for the actions of a third party that the gun makers and dealers and distributors had nothing to do with, then I don't know that there's any way that these businesses and industries could get insurance. And if they can't have insurance, then they must close their doors. And the gun ban lobby knows that, and so they're swinging for the fences, trying to eliminate all gun making in America through this method.
You're exactly right, Tom. They don't really care about what the law says. They know what their end state is, and that's to deny you the ability to exercise your Second Amendment rights by eliminating the gun manufacturer. If you can't buy a gun, then you get rid of guns in America, don't you? So they're not seeing the forest for the trees, because if you're going to eliminate the gun manufacturers from allowing law-abiding American citizens to exercise their Second Amendment rights, you're also taking away the industry that provides firearms to our law enforcement, that protects our communities.
And the military.
And the military. Our nation's military relies on the small arms that are made by American manufacturers. So they're really not taking a good, long, hard look at the long game on this and what it's going to do, but I don't think they really care. On top of all of that, we're seeing this brought by Governor Cuomo. So Governor Cuomo, who is still yet to answer for the thousands of deaths of elderly in his state because of his poor policies when it came to COVID-19. The same governor who has still yet to answer for allegations of, I think, up to 12 staffers that he is allegedly sexually harassed, and also the staffers that he had writing his book on government time that he's profiting off of. So it's really convenient that this governor at this time, once again, points to guns and says, that's the problem. Nowhere in his hour-plus of rambling did he say anything about holding criminals responsible or talking about how getting criminals off the street, putting them in prison. He only targeted the gun manufacturers.
And you notice that nowhere in all of that rambling and calling for these new measures against gun makers did he talk about the great success they have had in reducing crime in New York by virtue of the SAFE Act that they put in 8 years ago, which he said was going to be the end-all and be-all, and we must do this thing. And now he's turning around and saying, even though New York has the SAFE Act, which he pushed so hard, now we must declare an emergency because of gun crime.
You're exactly right. I mean, every time they go at another tact on trying to get after gun control, it really is an admission that everything that they've told you up to that point was a lie. That, they keep telling us that if I just had this one more thing, we can get this criminal problem back in control, we'd be able to take care of it. Well, again, what they're failing to understand is that, people were buying guns at record levels last year, to include over 8.4 million first-time gun buyers, not because they wanted to go out and immediately commit a crime. They were buying guns because there was crime shooting through the roof, and they wanted to protect themselves.
Exactly. Well, that basically they have arrived at the conclusion I arrived at many years ago, which is I don't want to outsource my safety. And people have figured out they don't want to outsource their own safety and the safety of their families. And so they said, we're just going to go take care of this ourselves. We're going to go buy a gun, or maybe another gun, or maybe a third gun, and get some training, and we're going to protect ourselves. And so, that's ultimately what's going on. So NSSF is going to sue. They're going to challenge this in court. I know that Larry Keene from NSSF said the law is unconstitutional, plain and simple. It's abhorrent that Governor Cuomo is rehashing a decades-old failed playbook that was rejected by the courts in the 1990s and early 2000s. So we're going to go back and fight this same battle again.
Unfortunately, we're going to have to. But again, it's important to understand that any of these public nuisance lawsuits that were brought by the cities, municipalities, it was brought in conjunction with when Governor Cuomo was the Secretary of the Housing and Urban Development, in partnership with the NAACP to bring manufacturers into court. None of these court challenges brought under these public nuisance lawsuits ever survived. None of them were successful. Unfortunately, it took time, money, and effort from the manufacturers to have to fight against these. And that's what Governor Cuomo talked about, was a death through 1,000 cuts. And that's all he wants to do, is just lead the industry dry through litigation and legal costs.
Let me explain what you're talking about, because when you say it costs money, the numbers I have heard is probably north of this. But defending these lawsuits, and we're talking 20 years ago now, or 15 years ago, it costs more than $200 million on the part of the gun makers to fight off these lawsuits. Money that could have gone into R&D, could have gone into safety improvements, could have gone into education, could have gone into Project Child Safe. But no, we had to spend it on lawyers and court fees and everything else to stop this politically driven attack on the Second Amendment.
You're exactly right. And you kind of hit the point on these. This is money that could have been invested in some of the safety programs that the industry has today with all these manufacturers who are members. Again, we have that Project Child Safe. We have two partnerships with the ATF to make sure that guns stay out of the hands of those who should never have them. One through our Don't Lie for the Other Guy campaign to prevent straw purchases, remind the public of the penalties if you try to attempt to straw purchase a firearm, as well as the Operation Secure Store, which is to help improve security at retailers to make sure that we can stop some of these smash and grabs. We also have our